Hey guys, how's it going? I hope this finds you well. So today, as you can see here on the screen, we're gonna take a quick look into custom borders, how to create them, how to use them, and how to experiment with them a little bit. As you can see here on the preview already, we're gonna be looking at two types. The first one is a simple horizontal line kind of setup where we can define if we want a top border or if you want a bottom border or if you want both. And we also can set the color and set the stroke width. And here below we're gonna explore a little further how to customize it a little bit more, where we can add a gradient to it, we can add a shape to it, and then again choose between if you want a top one and a bottom one. And this is quite useful when you want to kind of like expand a little bit on your design and add a little bit of a flair to make it more customizable. Like, and you can see this I think all over the place. Like, for example, the latest the latest living glass, liquid glass, yeah, exactly, the latest liquid glass from Apple kind of plays a lot with this type of borders, with this type of gradient borders, and you can see it like all over if you have an iPhone. I know this is a Android tutorial, but I think if you are a mobile developer, you should take a look at everything. So I'll put some screenshots of what I'm talking about in terms of how these things are used out there. So let's just dive right in. We're gonna go from the beginning, how to create it from helper data classes into using the painter, the draw with content, etc. So we can achieve this. So I'm gonna delete everything that we have, and then we can really start from the beginning. Okay, so everything now is gonna kind of break off. Let me comment this one out, and let's comment this one out as well, and then let's begin. So first things first, let's just define we're gonna have two helper data classes just to help us pass the values for those borders to those new extensions that we're going to do in the modifier. So in this case here, we're gonna extend the modifier to allow us to play with the borders. So first of all, let's just create here a simple data class that will have, you can give whatever name you want, that doesn't really matter, but it would have a width that would define the width of the border, and it would have a color that will again define the color of the border. So like I said, we will here tap into the modifier and we will extend that modifier, right? So let's get into that. So let's create an extension here, top and bottom border, and then here it will take a top border, top one border. I won't put the exclamation here, the nullable here yet, because I want to get to the situation where you guys see why that is useful. And then let's go bottom border, border, and that's it. That should be more or less what we need to start, right? So what we're gonna do here, so in this case we're gonna work with a draw with content. We're gonna draw this border on with the content, where in a sense of content will be that, and then the border will be that as well, more or less under the same layer. Now in this case here, we need to lump it. There you go. So first and foremost, we're gonna have a hierarchy. So that content would be here on top. Let's draw that content, and then we're gonna come and start drawing our simple horizontal border. So first things first, what we're gonna do here is, you would say, well, let's tap into that border and start extracting the values that we had and draw whatever we have to draw, right? Exactly, that's it. But why would we prefer to have a properties that are nullable here in this case? Well, because if we go into a customization kind of situation where, because Compose already gives us, you know, default borders on surfaces, on modifiers, etc. But that is always a locked border in the sense that you will get top and bottom, like always, right? It will always get the whole shape of the component. But here you want to have the control to say, okay, I want the top, or I want the bottom, or I want both, right? And how can we do that? So if we define this parameters as nullables, we can then tap into what is present at the construction of this extension and then draw that, right? So if top is there, draw top. If bottom is there, draw bottom. If both are there, draw both, right? So let's do exactly that. I won't go into, you know, the basics of you know, Kotlin and nullables and all that stuff in this tutorial. This will be focused on, you know, playing with the borders, playing with the draw, and seeing the effects of that under our context. But again, if you guys want basic Kotlin, you know, foundation stuff, there's so much out there. But again, if you want me to create, just let me know and I'll schedule some time for that as well. So here, the first thing we're gonna do is, yeah, we're gonna check if that, you know, top parameter is there. And if it's so, let's use it. Let's use it to create what we need to create. Here in this case, the auto generation is giving me a rectangle. I'm like, that's not what we want. We want to create, in this case, a simple line. So we're gonna tap into the draw line functionality. And this draw line functionality here, as you can see, it needs a couple things. It needs brush or color, an offset, stroke, cap, path effect, flow. There is a bunch of things that you can do. But here in this case, that's what we're gonna use is simple defining the color, defining the stroke width, and defining where does that line start and where does that line begin. Okay, so first and foremost, let's see what it will give us. Nothing, that's great. We can just do it from scratch. So first and foremost, let's say the stroke width will be the width that comes from our parameter. Simple, very easy, very straightforward. Now, we're gonna say we need to define the starting point of this, right? So where does this draw starts, right? And then here we need to tap into the offset. And yeah, the autocorrect was right on the dot, which is we want to start from the center position, oh sorry, not the center, the initial position of the drawing, which is the top left corner, which is position 0, 0 under the coordinates. So we're saying, okay, our line starts at 0, 0, and now we need to say where it ends. So we're gonna go into end, and then here what we want is we want to stay on the same, because it's a top, right? So we want to stay on the same Y position, but we want to move the drawing along on the horizontal axis. So we're going to have to go to the end of whatever component that this is being drawn with, right? So let's get and tap into the offset. And then here, what we need to tap into is the draw scope gives us a bunch of useful things. And in this case here, we can tap into the size of a component, right? So we're gonna directly tap into that size, and I'm gonna say, hey, give me the length of you know? So the width, right? So we're saying, give me the extreme width, the end of you, and we still wanna stay on the same Y position. Next, we want to define our color, right? So we just hit the color, we tap into again on that parameter, and we have our color. So he's complaining. Why is it complaining? Well, because this asks for a float, and this border has been defined as a DP. We don't need that, so let's get that at a float, and that's it. So we kind of defined the beginning of this. So let's just take a quick look to see how it looks so far. Let's bring this guy back, and here it's not a DP, it's a float, and this is a foot. So let's see. There you go. So that is our first top one. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And as you can see, this is just a box, you know, with a background color of black. And then we are using a surface here as a representation of the component that we're using to draw the border on. And then here, as this is an extension of the modifier, we're just giving a size to it, a padding here, so you know it's not, you know, at the border here of this box. And then we are defining our top border, right? We're saying, hey, this is the size that we want. You could use a DP here and then convert it later on. That would also be fine. But just for this case, let's just keep with the float. Okay. And then yeah, it draw exactly as you want. So if we come here and say, you know, 4, that border should get thicker. And if we extrapolate a little bit more, it should get even thicker. So yeah, you get the idea. And color, of course, you will also, you know, be applied. There you go. So now let's work with, I was gonna leave it at that. Let's work with implementing our bottom part. Again, very simple. It's basically the same as this, but we just need to, you know, we just need to now swap the parameter that we're using as a reference, and now we need to play with the start and bottom. So the start is exactly the same, right? We want it to start at, you know, at the beginning of the y-axis, but now we need to bring it all the way down into the limits of the y-axis, right? And here we're gonna use the same, right? We're gonna tap into the size, and we're gonna say, hey, give me the maximum height that you have. So there you go. The starting point now is at the beginning, at the x-axis, and at the end of the y-axis. Why is the line going all the way there now, making it perpendicular? It's because, well, the end is still pointing to the same position as the top. So now we just need to, again, change things around. So here, now we're gonna say, hey, you need to go to the end of this in terms of x. So we're gonna say, go all the way to the end. Great. And then now we need to say, hey, I want you to go to the end of, you know, of the y. Same thing, right? So we can see it come here, and then height. And there you go. Why are you complaining with me? You're not access in terms of geometry offset. Interesting. So here, what am I doing wrong? So let me cut that. Oh, right. It was complaining because we were missing a tiny little thing. But then now, let me bring that back. There you go. There you go. So there you go. So we told where the end is, you know, at the end of the y, and at the end of, like, sorry, at the end of the x, and at the end of the y. And there you go. We have the border right there at the bottom. So again, if we come here now into the parameters and we hit the 10 there, and we say, hey, go green. There you go. So this is, you know, how you can achieve a basic custom border using the modifier, extending the modifier, getting the draw with content, drawing that content, whatever that content is, and then, you know, using those values that we have here from our helper class to draw a straight line, right? Starting at the beginning, then going all the way to the end, maintaining the position of the X, and defining our color. And then for the bottom, you know, we just invert the positions and apply the same logic, right? And there you go. Here you have it. Now let's move on to implementing that more customizable with a gradient, but also tap into the shapes. And then for this one, we're gonna have to use a little bit of math. It's not too much. It's just for us to understand where the center is, how much offset that we need to apply to that in order for the border to be at the extreme of the component, right? So it's actually a border, right? So again, let's start with a very simple helper class that we're gonna use here. And we're gonna go with basically the same. We're gonna go with a width, and we're gonna go, in this case, with a brush, because we wanna apply not just like one color. We want to be able to have many colors there to create that effect of translucent, you know, alpha, whatever you want to feel with it, whatever you want to apply to it. So in that case, we want to use a brush. So let's go. So let's get a data class going. A class, and we're gonna call this gradient border. And then here, let me get that exactly. So here we're gonna have, like I said, we're gonna have a stroke width. It's gonna float, and then here, no, we don't want a color. Like I said, we want a brush. Wow, brush, right? There you go. That is our helper class. Now we're gonna go into constructing our modifier, right? And here it's kind of like we start kind of like the same. It's the same kind of approach. So we're gonna tap into that modifier, we're gonna extend it, and then we're gonna call this one gradient. Let's just call it gradient. Let's say top and bottom, just to be clear. Top, bottom, border. Yeah, there you go. There you go. So now we also need to define our parameters for this, same thing as we did here. So let's say top is asking for the border, but in this case we want the gradient one. There you go. And then bottom. Yes, there you go. One thing that I forgot here, and it's quite useful, and you guys gonna see here if I delete this, is we haven't defined default values for those parameters, and that causes us the usage of that extension to request for anyone that's using it to define a value, even though it's a nullable, right? Even though here it is a nullable, Kotlin still needs us to define a default value. Otherwise, anyone calling in needs to tell, hey, what am I, right? So in this case here, how you can accomplish that is just by saying null. In this case, if you want to define a default value, you can do it in the same. And in this case, you would do something like, you can do something like border, you know, just coming here and defining like, you know, a default value where you can say, hey, you are 1 and your color is, you know, white. And there you go. This is another way for you to do it. Defining a default value, which we're gonna use on the one below. But in this case here, let's just leave it as null. There you go. So that's that. And then here it causes us not to have to, you know, implement that bottom part. But in this case, let's bring it back. Let's say that, let's say bottom. There you go. Okay, 10 blue. Okay, let's leave it like that for now. And then now let's start constructing this one, right? So this one here, same thing. Let's apply a null here, and then let's tap into what we need to do. So in this case here, I'm gonna use a drawBehind in this case for us to implement this functionality. Okay. So again, if you have any doubts or if you want to know a little bit more about, you know, the draw scope, draw with content, drawBehind, and all that stuff, I'll put some links for the documentation. But I do highly recommend, if this is not familiar to you, to just go in, take a quick look. It's not hard to understand, and just get familiarized with these concepts. Okay. So here in this case, let's do a drawBehind. And yeah, there you go. Now we have the scope that we need to do whatever we want to do. So now here, let's just tap into the values that we have from the top and from the bottom. I'm gonna extract the width. You could get away without doing that, but later on, if you do want to define more parameters, for example, if you want to come here and give like a default stroke width, right? For example, if you want to like also allow the color to define a stroke width, you could do that and that would override, you know, whatever is being passed on the values. I'll show you what I mean. Like for example, here we're gonna say top stroke width, and we're gonna say, hey, let's go back into, no, let's leave it like this, because here we can see how we would then convert from DP into float or pixels, right? Let's leave it as DP for now, and I'm gonna come and do the same here, so we can have another vision of how to work with this type of values. So in this case, what am I trying to do here? I'm just trying to say, hey, do we have a default value of the stroke? Are we overriding the stroke? So that should be our first check, first line of hierarchy, because is an overarching value that is gonna override everything else, right? So the first thing that we're gonna do, again, let's set this as nullable, right? Because the user you might not want to use this, right? You might just want to define it through the parameters, through our default parameters of data class, right? So we tap into that same thing. We check and we say, hey, do you have a value? And if you do have a value, let's turn that value into pixels, right? And then here there is a helper function directly coming from the compose that we can use. Let me just stroke with DP. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we need. Now here, yeah. Let me just take a quick look at my notes to see if we're on the right track, with a perfect track. This is the perfect track. That is a stroke. Okay. Now, what is going on with you? Why are you going on value? We don't need to go on value. There you go. So we are grabbing the stroke, which is defined here in DP, and then we're just converting it to pixels because later on we're gonna have to use it, the floats, right? So we're tapping into that, and then we're saying, hey, do you have that value? Yes, great. If you do not, then let's give you like a Elvis operator here, which just allows us to say, if this doesn't exist, go to the next one to check. And as you can see, our auto-completion is already giving us what we need, right? But again, that value is a nullable, right? We may not want to have a top at all, so we might not even pass that value on. So how can you safeguard yourself? That you just give a default value to it. In this case, we're gonna say 0, And then here we're gonna apply the same thing for the bottom. There you go. We tap into that stroke. We're checking it first if you do have a value. If not, go into the bottom parameter. If not, just give it a default value. Okay, there you go. So now, just to allow us to not draw something that does not have a stroke, because for example, if those values are not passed and for some reason you add that to it, Compose will still try to draw that even though the stroke is 0, and you don't want to do that, right? And the way that you go about this is simple. You just check and you say like, hey, is this top stroke bigger than 0? Not big. In this case, we're gonna say if it's smaller or equal to 0, which you don't want the negative values here. Like that's not gonna work, right? So you need to safeguard the use of this. Of course, you're the one creating it, you know how it is, but imagine that you in the project and in this case, this should be commented. There should be a comment to say how to use it, but also it's always good for us to play it safe, have like a safe approach to code, and then say, hey, even though I know that this is clear, let me just put a safeguard here to make sure that things flow and not drawn if there's no correct value on it, right? So we're checking this first, and then we're saying the same thing for the other one. And if this is the case, what we're gonna do here is that we're just gonna return our draw behind. We're just gonna say, hey, I have nothing to really do it. Like I don't have anything that would make sense to draw because my stroke is 0 or is negative value for some reason. Just return the draw behind and be done with it. But if the values are correct, right? If the values are correct, we're gonna move forward. Now, I want this gradient to be able to take a shape, right? Not just to be a horizontal line. So let's give a shape parameter here, right? And that shape parameter here, we can go on the same nullable path, but in this case here, I'm just gonna, because I want this to be able to have a shape, this is mandatory for this one. I'm not gonna make it nullable, but I'm still gonna give it a default value so that when I call it, you know, I know that if the shape is already, he is giving rectangle, but I don't want rectangle, I want a circle shape. If the shape is already a circle, I don't need to define that value, right? So now, first and foremost, we're gonna check if that value, if that shape is indeed a circle, right? Because we want to draw it as a circle. So we're gonna check that shape, you know, because someone might use this in a different way, and that's not what we want, right? So we're gonna say, hey shape, are you equals to a circle? Yes, I am. If you are, we can continue, right? So now, what do we need to do? Because we are working with a circular shape, and we want that border to be at the extreme of that, we need to have some references in order to tell the draw where to draw things. So the first thing that we do is that we want to get the radius, right, of this shape. And here is, you know, kind of like a simple math. So we're gonna say radius, so we're gonna get the size and then divide it by 2f, basically. So in this case, we're gonna get the width and dimensions, right? Because we wanna do the calculation with the width of the circle, right? So we're gonna go into width. Here is not the width, let's get the minimal dimension of this thing. Yeah, there you go. Just to give you a little bit of context, what does this give us? The lesser magnitude of the width and the height. So we're gonna say what's the lesser of u, and I'm gonna calculate on top of that to get our radius. There you go. Now, the next thing that we need to get is our center, right? Because we wanna say, okay, I know the radius now, but I need to know where the center is, because I need to then offset this border to be at the extreme, right? So let's go. So here, what we're gonna say center, and then here is a simple offset. There you go. It's a simple offset that divides our width and height to give us our center, right? There you go. We know the center, we know the radius. Now we can start drawing, right? So same approach as we did before. We're gonna check if we have that value on top. If we do, let's tap into it. Right, so here, in this case, we're not gonna use a line, we're gonna use a draw an arc, right? Because we want an arc kind of shape, right? So here, like I said, we will use a brush, right? Because we wanna have the ability to customize that color as much as we want, right? So let's go into here, and then, yeah, as you can see, it's already giving us kind of what we need, but I will explain exactly what's going on. So first of all, we're defining the brush, and then we're defining our starting angle, because this is the top. We're saying, hey, start at 180 and then do a sweep angle of 180 as well. So right, we start at 180 and then we do a sweep angle of 180, right? And then now we need to say use the center. In this case, we're not going to use the center. And then we're going to have to define what? We're going to have to define the top left, and we're going to have to define the size and the style, right? The top left is kind of already giving us what we need there. We're going to say, hey, the center of this minus the radius, and then the center of y minus the radius. There you go. So that will give us the top left, and then the sweeping angle, the starting angle will come, and then the sweep angle will come as well. So again, the center minus the radius, the center of y minus the radius, and there you go. And then now we're gonna go into the size, and the size here is radius, you know, times 2f. And same thing for the y. Same thing for the y. We're doing with the circle after all, isn't it? There you go. Next thing that we need to do is we can go on to define a style, and in this case here, the style what's gonna be is our stroke, right? So let me see if there you go. I missed one thing, and one thing that I missed was the definition of the stroke, right? So let's say stroke, and then this stroke here, we're just gonna call it with the value that we extract from here. There you go. We define our stroke. Stroke is there. Now we come here and then we say, hey, style stroke. There you go. So we have the drawing of the top arc, right? Let's just revise this a little bit. So first and foremost, what we did, we defined all of our parameters that we're possibly going to use. This can be extended if you wish to, but this kind of gives us what we want. We grab the values of the stroke, first and foremost, off the top. We do a bit of a check to understand if the values are within the range that we want. If they are not, we just say we don't have what we need, just move on. And then later on, we just do a double check on our shape because we want this to be a circular, right? A circular board, right? You can even argue with me and say, hey, you don't really need to have this. And we possibly can eliminate that. Let's just take a quick look. But for now, let's just leave it as it is, right? And then next, we discover the radius because we're gonna have to use that radius to give the size of this arc. And we also discover our center because we're gonna have to use that center to define where the top left is, right? After we have that, we tap into a parameter, make sure it exists, create a stroke class, a stroke, date class here that will be used then by the arc. We define our brush, we define our starting angle, we define our sweeping angle. Not gonna use the center here in this case. Top left, size, and our stroke. And there you go. So this should already work. So let's test that. So let me tap into this other preview. And there you go. So this preview here is set in a way that I'm giving it a source. So I don't need that, and I don't need that for now. But I'm not seeing anything. Why I'm not seeing anything? Well, because it is a nullable value, right? But it is defined as a default variable as new. So in this case, we need to pass something into it, right? So let's go down, and then let's say top. There you go. And now he was gonna ask for a stroke, and it's gonna ask for a brush, right? There you go. And now here, we're gonna have to provide a list of colors, right? Because it's a brush. It's not just a solid color. And there you go. So here we set blue, and here we set green. And remember, every time you're passing, like you're working with linear gradients, you always need to use more than one color. Otherwise, you're gonna get a compilation failure because it needs more than one color to actually work, right? So there you go. Exactly what we need, right? It's being drawn on the top of this component, and it's using the colors that we want, and it's using, in this case here, we overwritten, not overwritten because we didn't pass any default value for the top of this, right? This default value here, yeah, exactly. No, exactly. We're just defining the gradient border value here. We're not overriding, sorry. We're just defining the value of what it should have. What I meant by that was if we had gone and said stroke width, and then I say 2 dp, you're gonna see that that's gonna be overwritten. There you go, because this stroke width here, right, value is the first one in the hierarchy to be checked. So if it is present, it will, discard everything else that's after on the check. But in this case, let's just not do it, just for the example. Right, so what is it missing now? It's missing just for us to define the bottom part, which is basically the same with just a little bit of a change in terms of how the angle is then being calculated, right? So let's go. So here we can basically copy this out, And the only thing that we need to change is now our starting angle is 0f, right? Starting angle 0f, the sweeping angle again is 180, right? And again, same configurations, top left, same, size is the same, and our stroke again is taken from here, but now here I'm saying top, but no, it's bottom. There you go, and here is not top as well, it is bottom, and there you go. So that's why we're seeing it, because it was still being drawn with the top value. And now if we go down here in our usage of it, and if we define now our bottom, let's get tan, and let's get that again. Should be back. There you go. So now if I go here and say red, we should see a bit of red. And if I go here and say, you know, gray, for example, let's go a dark gray. There you go. You should have that. So in a nutshell, I think that is it. We achieved what we wanted to achieve, which was, you know, the creation of a linear horizontal border that can be tweaked in terms of width and color, and then can be also set to be top present and bottom present. And then we went on to extend that implementation to use it in the sense of working with a circular shape, you know, checking that, calculating the radius, calculating the center for it, and then using the brush, you know, using the draw arc instead of the line, defining our angles, defining the sizes, the offsets, and the style that we want. And there you go. Basically, this is what we want. And from here, you can play around as much as we want. Like, for example, if you want something like coming back to the liquid glass from Apple, right? Just a quick example here is like if you have something like, let's say color dot transparent, and then you can go color dot blue, right? And then you can say, yeah, you can already see it kind of thing. And then you can say color dot transparent again, and it's complaining because I need to put that. There you go. You know, it will kind of create that, you know, fading illusion. And this is where you can just play around with this. You can just like play around. And if you go up and do the same, you know, you would have like a more uniform kind of effect where, you know, there is a fade in of the color, and you can give more like a shimmer, more composed effect to your component. Anyway, that is everything I wanted to share with you guys. If you have any questions, if you have any doubts, just, you know, hit the comment section. I'll, you know, try to reply to everything. And again, I stress the fact that if anything from what I described here doesn't make any sense in terms of the terminology of Compose and all of the things that you can do with the draw scope, please take a look into the documentation. I'll put some links down in the description as well. And yeah, until next time, bye.